Hello everyone. This video will show how to rewrite a given trigonometric expression into a single trig ratio without a fraction. Now let's go over this example. So we're given secant of theta times sine of theta. Now looking at the table of formula on the side, we can go ahead and rewrite this secant of theta as 1 over cosine of theta. And this sine of theta, looking at the table of formulas on the side, can be written as cosine of theta over cotangent of theta. From here, we can go ahead and say that we can cross out our cosine of theta and cosine of theta. So we are left with 1 over cotangent of theta. Now looking at the table of formulas on the side again, 1 over cotangent of theta is tangent theta. So then we can go ahead and say that this whole expression that we have right here is equal to tangent theta. If you notice, this expression that we have right here was transformed into one single trig ratio without a fraction. If you stop right here, that is still a fraction. You still have to simplify it so that it doesn't have a fraction. So that is equal to tangent theta. So this whole thing right here is equal to tangent theta. Now let's have another example. So the expression for the second example right here is cotangent of theta times sine theta. Now looking at the table of formulas on the side, this cotangent of theta can be expressed as cosine of theta over sine of theta. And we keep this sine of theta up there. From here, we can go ahead and cross out sine of theta and sine of theta. So we are left with cosine of theta, which means that this whole expression that we have right here is equal to cosine of theta. Now let's move on to the next example. In this example right here, we're given cosine of theta times secant of theta times cosecant of theta. The trick in simplifying trigonometric expression is that we have to make sure that we come up with, as much as possible, we can have sine or cosine. So in this problem right here, we already have a cosine, so we're going to go ahead and write that up here. Looking at the table, we can see that this secant here is 1 over cosine of theta. And this cosecant of theta right here from the table, this is equal to 1 over sine theta. This cosine theta right here has an invisible denominator of 1. So we can go ahead and cross out cosine and cosine. So we are left with 1 over sine, which is pretty much cosecant of theta. So this means that this whole thing is cosecant of theta. We cannot have 1 over sine of theta as our final answer because it says here that it shouldn't have any fraction. Now let's have another example. In this example right here, we're given sine of theta, secant of theta, tangent of theta. Again, the trick in order that we can simplify trig expression as much as we can, if we can, we have to change everything to sine and cosine. So in this problem right here, we keep this as sine theta. Looking at the table on the side, this secant of theta can be expressed as 1 over cosine of theta. And looking at the table of formula on the side, this tangent of theta can be expressed as sine of theta over cosine of theta. From here, we're going to multiply everything. Sine of theta times 1 times sine of theta is sine squared of theta. Cosine of theta times cosine of theta is cosine squared of theta. Looking at the table of values on the side, we see that sine theta over cosine theta is tangent theta. Since we have a squared here, this tells us that this whole thing is equal to tangent square of theta. So this tells us that this whole thing is tangent square of theta. So that is how we rewrite the given trigonometric expression into a single trig ratio without a fraction.